Bell Ribeiro-Addy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise to speak to new clauses in my name and the name of other members, namely the member for Walthamstow, Edinburgh South West, Vauxhall, Battersea and Glasgow North East, and really all those amendments that stand against this fundamentally flawed bill. And to start by mentioning one of my motivations for my new clauses, in my constituency, the fatal police shooting of Chris Carber, an unarmed black man, has sent shockwaves through a traumatised community. And I would like to offer my condolences to the Carber family, his friends and his community. I'm not saying more, Madam Deputy Speaker, for risk of sub judice, and especially since an inquest is ongoing and the IOPC are conducting a homicide investigation, and because they're also considering whether race played a factor in his shooting. But I'm sure, Madam Deputy Speaker, that everybody across the whole House will agree that a just society is one in which your race does not determine whether or not you are over-policed as a citizen and under-policed as a victim. But with a government that seems hell-bent on ramping up policing powers and presiding over worsening inequalities, it's clear that there will be an uphill struggle to realise this vision. Madam Deputy Speaker, this bill contains a significant expansion of police powers, again, including measures that the government already attempted to put within the Policing, Crime Sentencing and Courts Act. These measures were opposed in the other place, so I don't understand why they're trying to bring them back again. And this is one of the reasons why my new Clause 15 sets up that there must be a public inquiry into the policing of black, Asian and minority ethnic people, and my new Clause 16 contains a requirement for an equality impact assessment of this bill. Yet again, Madam Deputy Speaker, having to ask that this government respect that equality is the law and not put legislation forward that clearly infringes of the rights of minoritised groups. I will give way.
I'm very grateful to her. I'm sure when we hear figures from Wales that it is 8 out of every 1,000 white people are stopped and searched, when we compare that with a rate of 56 per 1,000 black people, there is something appalling in the state of affairs of stop and search across the United Kingdom and England and Wales legislation. But there is something particular in Wales that we need a justice assessment, impact assessment, Wales specifically, to understand and get to the root of why these figures are so extreme.
I thank my honourable friend for her intervention. She's absolutely right, and this is the reason why I'm also supporting new clauses 9 and 10 in the name of my honourable friend, the member for Battersea, regarding the use of stop and search powers. And what she is attempting to do here is to consult civil society organisations and consider the impact on groups with protected characteristics, just as my honourable member has mentioned. And this is something that should be clearly done by the government each and every single time it puts forward legislation, but it doesn't do this at all. It's particularly offensive that this Black History Month, when we talk about some of the struggles, the civil rights struggles of black people in this country, that instead of reacting to them and bringing about change, that the government is attempting to provide police with even more unaccountable powers. The same police that currently have a low trust and confidence amongst black communities. It's extremely low in black communities. And this is not least following the recent case of Ian Taylor in the borough in which my constituency is, who died in police custody, the kidnap, rape and murder of Sarah Everard by a serving police officer, also in my constituency, and the levels of disproportionate stop and search and the treatment of child Q and other children who have been strip searched, as well as extensive evidence of institutional racism and misogyny in the police. Just this week, Baroness Casey's report found that many claims of sexual misconduct, misogyny, racism and homophobia were badly mishandled. These patterns of unacceptable discrimination that clearly amount to systemic bias and cannot continue. These are not my words, Madam Deputy Speaker, but those of the new Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley. We know that our criminal justice system continues to be held back by institutional racism. Well, we on this side of the House, at least, know that. We have heard that in every single review, from the McPherson review to the Lammy review. In fact, we've heard that in every single review on institutional racism and the policing of black communities, except the government's recent CRED report, which claimed that it did not exist at all. However, the bill before this House today is not only a missed opportunity to remedy all of this profound injustice, but it's only going to exacerbate this racial bias and the discrimination that continues to persist. This is part of the reason why I'd like to speak in favour of a range of civil liberties amendments about ensuring human rights for all of our citizens. And it's at this point I'd like to mention new clause 11. I remember the member for Walthamstow. I'm a person of faith, and I believe that our human rights should be universal. But the point at which you exercising your rights begins to infringe on somebody else's rights, that's when you know that that right is wrong. And absolutely, we legislate on these things in this House again and again and again. So the idea that you could use your right to free speech to infringe on somebody else's right to get healthcare is absolutely wrong. So I'm very, very pleased to support that particular amendment today. Now, this bill continues to follow a pattern of a government that voices support for protests all around the world but wants to crack down on the right to speak up on it here at home. Protest is an important part of a democratic country because it's one of the driving factors that allows individuals to exercise their rights in free speech and speak up against an unfair and unjust government and its laws, like this government. And that's one of the reasons why I've tabled new clause 17, setting out that there must be a public inquiry into the policing of protests, including addressing the use of force, kettling, the deployment of horses, and the new policing powers contained in the bill and the previous Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Act 2022. I've also signed a range of amendments and new clauses seeking to protect our civil liberties and trade union rights, including those recommendations from the Joint Committee on Human Rights and those supported by Liberty, Amnesty and others. And I want to draw colleagues' attention to the Amendment 36 proposed by the Chair of the Joint Committee on Human Rights about the burden of proving reasonable excuse, or that the act was part of a trade dispute away from the defendant and making an element of the offence. This is because the government isn't even attempting to sugarcoat that this is aimed at trade unions. And I see trade unions as our last line of defence against this relentless and accelerating attack that we are seeing on the working class's living standards. This government know that their economic policies are unpopular and cause suffering, so they want to remove everybody's right to resist and fight back. I will give way.
I thank my friend for giving way, and she's making a very powerful speech in support of her amendments. I was with her at the demonstration outside New Scotland Yard following the death of Chris Carver. It was an emotional and passionate occasion. Everyone there was looking for justice and looking for knowledge and an inquiry. Would she support more pressure on the Home Office to hurry it up so that we can get some closure on that terrible loss of life and the pain that goes with it, and the beautiful way in which his cousin spoke at that demonstration will stay with me forever?
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention, and he's absolutely right. Far too often, families like the Carver family have to spend months, even years, seeking answers and justice for their loved ones. So I do hope that in the years to come, the IOPC quickly begin to look at measures to speed up the investigations that actually give family members answers about why they have died. And we have to remember that Chris Carver, and again, not to mention too much, but in that particular month that he died, the particular time around he died, he was one of two men that had been killed following contact with police, and one of over 1,000 that have died in police custody or following contact with police since 1990. And since that time, only one police officer has ever been prosecuted for any of this, and that's something that absolutely needs to change. Now, in conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, this public order bill is just a continuation of the government's assault on the right to protest, further criminalising people who call for the change that we need, and ramping up police powers to restrict demonstrations. It also can have really, really negative impacts on Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities. It's completely authoritarian and disadvantages the poorest and most marginalised communities. Unless it can be fundamentally amended, Madam Deputy Speaker, then I believe it must be opposed. Thank you.